Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Empowered Woman Retreat, where we are diving deep on powerful insights, tools, and practices to help us break free of what's been holding us back in business, love, and life. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Kara, and I'm your host and a transformation coach. And in today's session, we are focusing on empowerment through embodiment. And we are so lucky to have the incredible Lindsay Martin Ellis with us. She is a transformational mentor, a speaker, a podcaster, and an author. And she focuses on working with rising change makers with a heart-centered approach, supporting women in creating community and generating abundance and living their highest potential overall. She is a best-selling author, a global speaker, an international retreat facilitator, a podcast hostess, a human design and gene keys facilitator, and a brand partner with the fast-growing holistic Ayurvedic wellness company called Oliveda. When Lindsay's not serving humanity, you can find her playing in nature with her 11-month-old son, Cove, her rescue pup, Luna, and traveling the world with her husband, Chad. And she often is dancing her prayers to George Michael's Freedom on a regular basis, living a beautiful life. Lindsay is a true teacher, and she's here to support the collective during this incredible catalyzing time to be alive. So I'm just so pleased to have you here, Lindsay. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I always have tears in my eyes when people read that back to me. So it means that I must be on path.
Yes, oh my gosh. Yeah, just beautiful. Well, I wanted to start off jumping into the concept of embodiment. What exactly does it mean to be embodied, and how does that relate to maybe limiting beliefs and feelings and emotions?
Yeah. You know, much of humanity is disconnected from our bodies, right? Where we live in a culture where societally we're not taught how to process emotions, how to sentient our way through life, how to feel. And right, we're taught to kind of just brush it off and to stuff things down and, just get back up as quickly as possible. I notice it. I have an 11-month-old, as you mentioned, and I notice how often previous generations, like my family and in-laws and things, will say like it's okay every time that my son cries, and just mentioning over and over to say, like, to reframe that with I hear you, like I hear you, right? Versus it's okay, right? Allowing spaciousness to feel versus trying to make it go away so quickly. And what I found is our emotions are directly connected to our soul essence of who we are, because our soul carries memories, right? Our soul carries the stories of who we are. Our soul carries emotions. And so when we're not connected to our bodies and we're not feeling, we're disconnected from the purest part of who we are ultimately. And I believe if you're listening to this series, that's what it means to be empowered. It's to be in your sovereignty and to know who you are at your core and to move through life in that way.
That is so beautiful how you describe that. And oftentimes, because of the way that our society has kind of trained us and conditioned us, we can actually be afraid of feelings. And it almost like creates this perpetual cycle of trying to avoid them or, look the other way or just that disconnecting process. I think back to what you shared about your son and the example of I hear you versus it's okay, and how different that is. Like, I hear you is more around I see you, I'm validating you. Your feelings matter, but what you're experiencing is valid. Whereas the other is almost from an energy of trying to fix it and move to the other side without really recognizing the experience that's happening.
Yeah, and something that actually came through in meditation today was to move through it right? Or to move with it versus moving through it, right? So when we're feeling
Yeah.
something, it's like, how can we be in relationship with it versus we always hear like push through, move through. And yes, that's part of it, but oftentimes we're skipping the most essential part, which is to be with it, to sit with it, to be in relationship with it, to create the spaciousness, because I believe that our feelings are messengers and how we process those is through our vessel, which is our body.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So wise. What do you recommend for people, the most typical things that people probably know offhand about feeling tears. That's an obvious one, right? Or immense smiling when there's joy. But there's so much color and depth to feeling. Would you talk a little bit about that to help kind of break that down for people and how it might be more approachable for them to actually experience from that sensation standpoint?
Yeah, this is a great question. And as I mentioned, right, every emotion really carries a resonance. And so I can't tell you what it's going to look like when you are feeling grief, right? I can't tell you what it's going to feel like in your body when you're experiencing anger, right? We know what the resonance is. Like we all know, wait, we all have different life experiences, but I can relate a story of grief and I imagine you can too. And I imagine if you're listening to this, we've all experienced this wide range of emotions. And a lot of times because we're not taught how to be in relationship with them, they end up overpowering us and taking us out versus being in an empowered relationship with what the emotion is trying to teach us. And so a simple practice is when something is coming up. Obviously, not every situation we can take a vast pause, but you would be surprised with how quickly you can move again with that emotion by simply putting your hands on your body and taking a deep breath and asking yourself, what am I feeling in this moment? Just
Uh,
asking, what is the feeling? And then if you have the spaciousness, if you're in a private environment, sometimes I even go to the bathroom. I mean, there's times where I will walk into a public bathroom and I will just cover my mouth and I will just like scream into my hands, or I'll just like get the energy out. And so that's the first piece, is creating and ritualizing the fact that you are a soul in this human body that gets to feel. That's a gift that we all carry. Asking yourself the question, what am I feeling in this moment? And then once you feel that, it's like, what is it that I can do in this moment to move with it? And sometimes it might be crying. Sometimes it might be a deep breath. Sometimes it might be a walk in nature. Sometimes it might be cuddling up in a ball on the floor and just getting close to the ground and feeling supported by this planet and by the earth beneath you. Sometimes it's, so those are like, so let's talk grief for a minute, right? If you're experiencing sadness, it's like, what is going to create the spaciousness and the safe container to feel this? And I just gave some examples. If it's anxiety or if it's rage, screaming into pillows
mhm.
is one of my favorites. Stomping on the ground is another one. Getting that energy to move within your body is part of it. And so those are generally, again, some of the resonances that we move through that we often consider bad, but they're really just messengers that bring us back up into those elevated resonances of expansion and empowerment, like you mentioned, and beyond.
Yeah, gosh, those are such great examples of tools and things that people can take advantage of in any given time, just moving through these and taking that pause to be present with what's happening and allowing that relationship to unfold. One of the things that thinking about the anger piece, because anger can be really challenging for some people. Often, it can often be connected to experiences that of abuse, and they might shy away from anger or feel like, oh, this isn't safe to experience, I don't want to go there. But healthy anger is a valid and really important emotion for us to feel, and you gave some really great examples of ways to healthily express that. But I wondered if you would talk about uh, the possibility of actually experiencing that sensation, even like visualizing it in your mind, as opposed to express, like if somebody is really timid about it, is that a baby step they could take that would help get them closer to more of an expressive state with their feelings, more in relationship? Is that something that they could explore?
Yeah, I definitely think that's something that could be explored. And this is where the way that I teach is it's right. Like we all have different experiences and different traumatic experiences, right? And oftentimes, the intention of this is to work your way into creating a safe container to feel. And if that is starting to simply visualize and starting in that manner, absolutely, because we know the power of visualization, right? The brain doesn't know the difference between if it's something that we're imagining or something that's happening in real life. That absolutely can be supportive. What I have found is that experientially, though, when we're actually moving the body in a way that creates the spaciousness to be in relationship with that emotion, I've just found that the alchemy is quicker. And it's not like we're trying to rush through it, but it just becomes this
Yeah,
dance where we can just move through life almost like, clouds passing in the sky of I'm not attaching so much to this anger, right? Because again, we all have experiences, whether we've had, like, we all carry some sort of trauma, right? All experiences in our life are stored in the body. And so we've all had experiences with anger where someone's maybe yelled at us or gotten angry with us, or we've seen it with other people, right? Maybe directly or indirectly. And so that's the key, is to start to get to a place where you can move with it so
yeah,
that we don't attach to it in the same way. And it's a process and it's a practice. And that's why I think feeling it, for me, visualization honestly isn't as easy as feeling it. So also people are different in how they connect, right? Some people are great visualizers and daydreamers and things like that, where they can really manifest with the mind. For me, most of my powerful manifestations happen through the body. So that's a great question, because we're all different, we're all individuated, we're all unique. And that's why all of this is about trying it on and practicing and feeling what feels most resonant for you.
yeah, gosh, that makes so much sense. And I love your reinforcement of it being a practice. Like this is a process, and it takes some time. One of the things that with feelings that strikes me is we often are taught to label certain feelings and quite frankly judge them, and these certain maybe lower frequency feelings are bad or negative or whatever, but they all have an important place, and as you shared earlier, a gift in terms of being a message to us. Do you have any advice for people about how to detach from that judgment, how to
Yeah.
let go of the labels, so that it's easier to be in relationship with the feelings, whatever they are, however they're showing up?
Yeah, I believe that our humanity is our superpower. And the moment that I stopped projecting of this is right and this is wrong. And of course, there's right, we have codes of ethics, and of course, there's morality, and of course, there's things that I don't agree with, and there's things that are against the law, right? But ultimately, once I started to come from this mindset of everything is either an act of love or a cry out for love, right? Like people are hurting, and that is why people do the things that they do. And when people hurt, right, there's
Yeah,
opportunity to leverage that hurt and to catalyze them into something more meaningful. And other times that hurt takes people out. And so it's honestly, it goes back to the practice of whenever somebody does something to me, or I get upset, or I see something on social media or something in the media or something in the news where I'm like, wow, that's bad, that person did something wrong. What I always come back to is there a part of me that is a tyrant? Is there a part of me that is mean? Is there a part of me that judges others? Is there a part of me that X, Y, and Z? And Every single time, the answer is yes. Every single time I can relate back to a point where I'm mean to myself. I've judged myself. I've judged another person. And so, even though it's not to the same degree, that helps me recognize that we're all flawed and we're all divine, right? We're all children of God. We're all this divine sparkle of the universe, however you want to name it, right? We're all this beautiful piece of this huge divine puzzle. And we all have so much shadow, and we all have the same, again, we all carry those resonances within us. We all are all fractals of that diamond. And that's started to help me have a little bit more compassion for myself when I go into self judgment, and also more compassion for others. It doesn't mean that I'm condoning behavior, but I'm recognizing, wow, that person didn't have the tools. Wow, that person wasn't able to move with whatever that hurt was. And this is how they're reacting to life versus responding. And so I hope that helps kind of answer your question a little bit. And oftentimes that's challenging for people, especially if people have experienced a lot of trauma, right? It's really difficult to get to that level of forgiveness and compassion. But this is why we do the work, because ultimately
Yeah.
the forgiveness and compassion isn't about the other person. It's for ourselves. It's so that we can be empowered again, and so that we can move through this beautiful life in a way that's, again, more meaningful.
Gosh, Lindsay, it's brilliant what you're sharing, and so important. It's that opportunity to really self-reflect in those moments and see, yeah, and connect to that compassion because, as you mentioned, I mean, we are all things, and it may not be to the same degree as something that we're seeing in somebody else, but the capacity, the resonance for it exists, like in that greater human experience. I mean, we're all here for a learning. It's all about learning and growing, and how can we look at life's gifts in that context, and sometimes time helps to see things a little more clearly from the lens. But
Can I add one more thing?
oh, please, yes, this is great.
Yeah, time and practice, right? And so this is where bypassing, it's very different to go into what's now termed toxic positivity, right? And that's the moving
Yeah,
through and moving on. But over time, through this practice of introspection, right, of feeling, of being with my body, being in relationship with every emotion, with all of the life experiences, all the excruciating moments of what it means to be a human, right? Through that practice, I've been able to continue to work through, what does it feel like to be in forgiveness? What does it feel like to be in compassion? I still get triggered in my life. I still have judgment. And I get to go back into the practice of like, whoa, wait a second. What does this really mean? Right? Like,
yeah,
because for me, it's about how can I move through life in a way that, like, I want to be of contribution to what's happening in the collective right now. And this feels like leadership to me. This is how I feel the embodied human, and particularly woman, just because we do carry so much power and it's been repressed for so long, is going to be a part of the healing of this planet that we're currently seeing the shift happening right now.
yeah. So much healing opportunity. It's incredible. One thing, when you look at this invitation for us to self-reflect through our feelings and how we might be reacting or responding to another person, a circumstance, something that may be triggering to us, that's like that invitation to see, where can I grow? What does this mean? Um, what do you recommend people do to kind of maintain that balance between holding themselves very accountable, being gentle and compassionate to the point of really understanding, like, okay, this is mine, this is another's, and having that solid kind of boundary, but also, acceptance and really strong accountability for what we have control over, for our own empowerment journey, because that's what's so inspiring, right?
Yeah. So is your question more related to like how to know what's mine to carry versus somebody else's, and how?
I think that's definitely a piece of it. That's an important part, because I think for a lot of people that gets very muddied. And then yeah, let's break it into two questions, because let's address that. And then the other piece would be finding the balance between taking accountability versus like over accountability, almost to the point of self-blame, like finding that dance, between the two, basically,
Yeah.
as you're learning that dance of feeling and
Yeah.
connecting to the body more.
It's very nuanced. It's not what I have found is it's not an easy thing we do. Again, if you're listening to this, I imagine that we're like-minded in so many ways, but also so many of us have different belief systems, and I believe that we're meant to have different belief systems because again, we all can like activate that truth in other people. Um, and so what I have found through my own experience is that our humanity is directly connected to our divinity. So that's exactly what you're talking about. It's like, how are we like holding all of the parts of us that we don't like about ourselves, all of the parts that we try to avoid, all of the parts that we want to, that are like locked in the basement with cobwebs and we just want to stuff down and never meet again, all of our past regrets, right? All of the falling outs that we've had, all of the times that maybe somebody has transitioned and we didn't get to say those last words or whatever it is, we wish we would have showed up differently in different relationships. That is all sacred too. All of that is welcome. All of that shadow carries a gift, right? Because there's lessons and there's wisdom and there's so much beauty behind all of that. So it's challenging because when we're first kind of getting started, there will be blame. Like I still sometimes judge myself. I still sometimes blame myself. I still sometimes question, gosh, why am I still doing this thing? Like, why is this pattern still coming up? And that's how I mentioned it kind of starts to pass like clouds again because we're meant to evolve. So the same types of things are going to keep coming up for us to move with. However, we're at a different level of consciousness. So even though we may be experiencing a similar reaction or trigger or self judgment or whatever it is, we're not the same person that we were when you and I first entered this call, right? We have this
Yeah.
connection going, right? Like we've got beautiful coherence. I'm learning from you, you're learning from me. We're different. And so that's the beauty of it. So it's almost like, can we just, what I have found is the allowance. It's like, can we just allow before overcomplicating it? Like, what would it look like to allow? And what would it look like to be okay when we do go into self judgment or when we do not have compassion or when we do blame or when we are so rigid and holding on so tightly? That allowance is actually what moves us beautifully into acceptance. Like, we don't even have to try. It's just like, well, shit. Hopefully, we can cuss on this series. It's like, well, shit.
Yeah.
These thoughts, they're not going to stop. We have 70,000 thoughts a day, and most of them are unkind. So, what would it look like to just allow them? Hmm. And then we start to accept that we're whole beings. And then we start to accept, like, okay, sometimes I go back into old patterns. Other times I'm triggered. Sometimes I don't get enough sleep and I'm not as kind to my husband in the morning as I typically am, or whatever it is. And when that allowance that moves into acceptance, that's when the alchemy begins to happen. And we get to kind of dance in between the worlds of, okay, I'm a divine being and I'm human. I am all of it and all of it is sacred. And I believe that's when we're going to start to see, and we're seeing it now, less putting people on pedestals, less student teacher, more of us walking shoulder to shoulder in we all have medicine, we all have wisdom, and we all carry the same flaws. And something about that just feels extremely refreshing and
Yeah.
provides a lot of relief in my body.
Gosh, so much so, right? I mean, we really are experiencing this together, and it's yeah, I just love the way you described that, and the fact that that it is a journey, like it's this ever evolving flow and dance, and and opportunity to kind of raise our consciousness and learn and grow. I mean, what a perfect reflection to actually have the similar experiences so that we see how far we've come, as opposed to that actually representing something being wrong. I mean, so much of this is this opportunity for perspective shift as well, which can be incredibly empowering, right?
Yeah, and so much of this, if we're not in our bodies, and so this is where getting back into the practice of these things happen once we start to be in contemplation and experience and reverence for like all of the things that are happening. And this is why it's just like anything. We know what it's like to be on autopilot in an unconscious pattern. But this is creating an aperture, an opening for us to create a container of what would it look like to move through life more consciously so that I have more choice, so that I can be empowered in different conversations. So when I know when to speak and when to listen and everything in between.
Yeah. Do you find that there's a certain amount of time that is particularly helpful for people to devote as they're starting out and really building a regular practice of having more of that conscious relationship with their body and their feelings?
It's going to be different for everyone. I personally have found that when we try to say like 30 minutes a day, oftentimes that can feel overwhelming, right? It's like if you do, right, when we already have all these other responsibilities. And so I have something that I haven't thought about in a while that I call your miracle minute. And it's kind of what I talked about. Instead of like creating this huge practice, it's like when you feel triggered, when you feel overwhelmed by life, when you get out of bed in the morning and it's a challenge to start your day in a way that feels empowering. What would it look like to put your hands on your body, take a deep breath, and just ask yourself, what is it that I need in this moment? And your body will tell you, I need a
Yeah.
nap. Right. So instead of going for the coffee, and it's not to say like not to demonize, right? Like social media scrolling or binging on Netflix or going for the coffee. It's like, where do we go in autopilot when we're unconscious, when we don't want to feel? It's like, oh, I'm tired, so I'm going to get the caffeine. Oh, I don't want to feel my feelings, so I'm going to numb out. Those are the moments when we want to just create that little, right? That little moment to break the circuitry into the pattern that we already are going into to shift something. And I'll tell you, my patterns are food. My patterns used to be alcohol. My patterns are overworking. Even with moving my body, I used to be really hard on my body in the way that I used to work out because that was an escape mechanism. So even things that maybe society will coin something healthy and something productive and something meaningful can turn into a vice. And so that's part of the introspection is like we all know where we go when we don't want to feel. So when that's happening, can you just create the little shift of, okay, what's the story and what's the reality? If I put my hands on my body, I can feel myself in the material world in form, right? This is me, my soul, body, and
Yeah.
human form. Taking the deep breath connects with the vagus nerve, brings us back into parasympathetic state. The majority of the time, the vagus nerve is telling the brain what to do. So the body is actually telling the brain what to do, and then the brain does its thing, which most people don't know.
Yeah.
Create that softening to be in relationship with the body once we slow the nervous system down. And maybe the choice is I actually do want to watch Netflix, but I think I just want to watch one episode because this is really pleasurable for me versus, oh, now I'm staying up till 1 a.m. watching this thing. And now I feel even worse because I'm tired. And we're going to keep snowballing the patterns that are not serving. So they're really just there as protective mechanisms. And again, no judgment. We all do that because it hurts. And it does require a claiming. Nobody's going to come knock on our door and come save us. It does require us to claim that for ourselves and to simply start. So 1 minute when you're feeling something of just creating a new opportunity for you to be more aware and conscious of what's happening when you feel a certain emotion.
Gosh, that's so powerful and so simple and such a beautiful way to start shifting things incrementally. I love that. And you brought up something else that's so important. Is sometimes people don't realize that there can be shadow hidden in what seemingly a really like positive, great way of showing up, especially if it's something that is a pattern of behavior that society tends to really reinforce. For example, perfectionism. That's one that can fall into this easily, and such nuggets of wisdom and opportunity lie in those, as you mentioned, where we go to reflect or bring greater awareness and understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gosh, yeah. And then thinking about this, how can you most effectively access your intuition? How does that play into the embodiment piece as well?
Yeah, and I believe our intuition is really, it's just that compass that resides within us, right? And again, I believe that our soul, right, our body houses our soul, and that's the purest part of us, the part of us that is just, it's authenticity, really. It's like, who am I and how do I want to show up and how do I want to speak and how do I want to move through life? And so if we're not, if we're disconnected from our bodies and we're not able to feel, we are absolutely not going to be able to connect with our intuition. So again, it's almost, the intuition is a byproduct of just getting out of our own way and just exploring what would it look like to again be in relationship and move with all parts of myself, because again, that has a message for us that then leads us into what our soul is asking us to do, right? And it's like, I live my life now soul led. I used to be an engineer. I used to live in Florida. Now I live in North Carolina, right? There's just, I can see how all of the excruciating moments of my life that I didn't want to feel, once I began to actually witness them and be in relationship with them, I started to notice, ooh, I'm noticing the difference between my monkey mind and that part of me that's whispering and sometimes screaming at me to take the plunge, to leave the corporate job, to move out of state, to leave family behind, to have the child when I don't feel ready, whatever it is, to start the business, all the things. That's exactly how it happens. And so if you're on this, in this series and you're like, gosh, I just want to know my purpose. Gosh, I just want to know what it's like to feel empowered in my body. Gosh, I just want to know if I should leave this relationship or start this job or move to a new state or whatever it is. That's how you do it. You just got to start feeling.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Yeah. Thank you for reinforcing that because we aren't taught to feel in this world, and we aren't taught to really embrace it and find the beauty in it. So this is so incredibly powerful, and the magic that rests there for us when we embrace it is so incredibly mind-blowing, right?
And we can read in a book how to manifest and how to, connect with our intuition, right? But this is about experiencing, right? We can have a plan, but life happens. Last week, my
Yeah.
son had a fever, his first fever. We had a snowstorm. There were all of these things that started to happen. My nanny couldn't come, my schedule shifted, right? So that was just something small, right? Where sometimes big things happen where we lose a loved one. I was also here with Hurricane Helene and was displaced for several weeks. We have the fires that are going on right now out in California, right? Like there's these bigger catastrophic things, but then there's also little things that shake us up. And so we can plan all day and say, this is what I'm going to do. And going back to the perfectionism, I like to say it's precision versus perfectionism. I know what my day is going to look like. I have my ideal day. 99% of the time, my day does not go according to my ideal day, but I know how to come back to it because I know how I want to feel. I know how I want to move through life. I know what I value. And so that's a little perspective shift as well to kind of support you as you're moving through that.
Gosh, that's so important. Thank you for reminding of that too. And one of the things that comes to mind about that concept of that flow and the dance. Oftentimes some of our resistance comes out of a desire to control, right? And so as people are embarking on this experience and becoming more in touch with their feelings, and realizing that they are having the feelings. I mean, part of the intensity sometimes comes from basically being plunged into them. It's almost like there's a merge with them instead of that space. Do you find that just naturally comes over time? I mean, that's one of the things that people can look forward to experiencing, just, with that consistent effort of shifting relationship with their body. And
Yeah, so you mean like can you answer can you ask the question one more time? You were mentioning as it relates to space, so I want to make sure I'm clear on your question.
yeah, so, oftentimes feelings can be so intense because it's
Mm.
almost like people get entangled with the feeling as opposed to having that space to really see, like, okay, I am feeling this, I am not this feeling. Whereas it's like, the energy can be so entangled, so I don't, yeah, if you have any thoughts about that, I would love for you to share them.
Yeah, and this was actually the second part to your question that I don't think we touched on, right? Which what is
Yeah.
mine, right? What is mine and what is somebody else's? And it's also confusing to be a human because we all are individuated and we also are all connected. And so I'm feeling very deeply what's happening. Again, a great example is I was very directly impacted by the flooding in Western North Carolina. And so I have a little bit of PTSD as it relates to what's going on with the fires. I know people personally who have lost their homes, who have been displaced. I think so many of us at least know one person that's been directly impacted by what's going on over there. And so I got to move through that as well. And I also got to ask myself, what is mine? Mine is not to be on social media right now and to be looking at everything and to be engulfing myself and how on the front lines, how can I help and how can I show up? Because I'm still healing and rebuilding from that experience several months ago for me. Right. So when I tuned in and I asked, what is mine to do? It was check in on your people and you doing your practices and you moving the emotions in your body and you feeling what's happening is your leadership, right? Because me doing that for these fires is still supporting me on what happened in Western North Carolina. So it is a bit nuanced. I loved what you said, right? We are not our emotions, we feel emotions. That is absolutely what I have found to be true as well. So that helps us not be so attached to what we're feeling. However, as we start to feel more, we do start to become a bit more sensitive because as we're feeling, this is how we connect with our intuition, right? We've got all of these senses we can feel, right? We can connect in all of these different ways. So we do start to feel everything. And so the intention is, like you said, to just continue to keep practicing. I mean, there was a couple times last week where I was feeling very tired. Again, I had things in my microcosm of my personal household and also what was happening in the collective. And so it's just about giving yourself grace, being gentle with yourself, giving yourself what you need. And it is about showing up though. And so that's where I think it comes back to that conscious choice of what do I need in this moment so that I can process it, whether it's a 10-minute practice versus letting the whole week take you out because you're not in your body and you're letting all of the stuff on social media wreak havoc on your nervous system.
Yeah. Gosh, that was so well said. And that interesting part too about just really distinguishing and realizing that the gift exists in actually attuning to what you need. And there is a massive, beautiful ripple effect that comes from taking our own accountability with our own feelings. Because, I mean, that's another one of those misnomers in culture that reinforces, especially with women, give to others, and, sacrifice, and these limiting beliefs that have been conditioned. and we can break free of those and realize that we're actually giving ourselves and others more by doing this inner work, by connecting, by being embodied, right?
Yeah, and this is where cancel culture will try to tell you this is how you need to show up on social media. You have to be an advocate for every single thing that's happening on the planet. And that could not be that's the furthest thing from the truth, right? Like leadership, sometimes I've shared this, in other podcast episodes and on social media, right? Sometimes leadership for me is being in deep prayer and meditation around what's happening. Other times it's in my direct relationship with my family. Other times it's sharing something publicly. Other times it's donations monetarily or giving my time, right? There are so many different ways to show up and to leave and to give. And so that's where coming back to the practice is if we're not in our bodies, we don't actually know what is mine to do because
Yeah.
we're letting society tell us who to be, right? Because we're disconnected and we don't have that integrated nervous system experience. So it's nuanced. It can feel very complex and complicated, but if you just remember, allow, give yourself the minute to just allow, which moves you into the acceptance of being a whole human who's never going to
Yeah.
have it all figured out, who has plenty of flaws, that then moves you into the alchemy, which connects you with your intuition. And that allows you to move through that empowered state where you know exactly how you get to move through life and with who. And that's when it becomes a lot more fun and magical. And not to say excruciating moments and experiences don't happen, because that's how we learn and grow. But there's a softening that begins to happen when life happens.
Gosh, so beautiful and powerful. I wanted to make sure to give you a chance to talk about the free gift too that you generously offered to share, and I know you have a bunch of free teachings available on your social media platforms that are available for people to check out too, which is amazing. So thank you for that.
Of course. Yes. So my free gift is it's an experiential masterclass, because in case you haven't figured out by now, everything for me is experiential and through the body, right? So we can talk about it all day, but we can actually, right, integrate these teachings of what you and I had talked about today experientially in how to move your limitations into liberations. And so this will help you unlock your highest potential. And so what I share in the masterclass, it's a short and sweet masterclass, and it's really like an activation because I provide embodiment tools for all of them. But what I go into is the three deepest forms of collective programming that keeps humanity stuck in our limiting beliefs. And then what I do is I move you through the three universal truths that are actually going to open you up to embodying your unique path of liberation. So I tell you kind of some of the deepest programs that are running rampant in our society, which is a story, and then what's actually true. And then I give you three potent practices to kind of anchor those into your bodies and move through. And it's all part of the allow, the accept, and the alchemize methodology, which is my soul alchemy method. So that's my free gift, is the experiential masterclass.
It sounds incredible. Thank you, Lindsay. And make sure to check that link out. It's below on the page. So definitely experience that beautiful class. And if you haven't already signed up for the private Facebook group for our retreat, I really encourage you to do so. We have this incredible community of like-minded souls, and it's a platform for just connecting, encouraging, greater support and safety. So definitely take advantage of that if you haven't already. And before, as we come to a close, Lindsay, I just wanted to give you a moment that what you've been sharing has just been fantastic. It's so incredible. And I just wondered if there was any last pearl of wisdom or like takeaway overall that you wanted to leave with the audience that's watching.
I think one of the things that's coming through is it's funny, I'm actually co-hosting a retreat with Brita Aragon, who's also part of this series in Greece, and it's called Emergence from Limitation to Liberation. And so I think it's interesting. I just had my son, he's going to be a year in a couple of weeks, and this is my first summit type series since having my son. And I love that all of this is coming together again, this moving from limitation into liberation, right? This empowered woman ultimately. And so if that speaks to you where you love transformation, right? And you want to get together in sisterhood, Brita and I are hosting this beautiful retreat in Santorini, Greece to kind of help you move through that as well.
That sounds incredible. Absolutely magical. Well, thank you so much, Lindsay. This is amazing, and everyone who's watching, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. Much love.